AppSheet has done, and this has actually been a feature for a while, is that it's simplified that whole process of integrating machine learning and AI into your application.
So, Chris, let's say someone says, "Ooh, that sounds like something I need. A quick app done within, let's say, a couple of days." How can you get started? Who can use AppSheet?
Very quickly stated, you can just go to appsheet.com and begin playing with it. You don't even have to, you're not necessarily having to pay anything as well. There is a level of usage, which is just personal prototyping, which is free. So anyone can play with the technology if they have a spreadsheet, they want to like build out a solution, at least from a standpoint of becoming familiar with the technology. There are different SKUs depending on your usage models and your enterprise, where you can continue to invest into it more aggressively, I'd say. Now, once you're using AppSheet, you'll see a lot of links into the help documentation. There's a lot of online tutorials, videos. So you can go to the online community as well, the community.appsheet.com, and you'll get a feel for like AppSheet development. One of the things that we're also doing is like we're striving to add fresh new content, which is more open. Speaking of the community, actually, I should say, as we're striving to put more fresh new content into the community. So we have the office hours that we plan semi-regular, semi-monthly, I would say, just to make sure that people are aware of new features. We've also started up like an app jam concept where we can actually provide just training to anyone who wants to attend on specific topics of how to get started. So that's kind of the trend that we're going with the community. We do have like some original I would say users out there who have been using AppSheet for years, and they're at a much higher technical level. And we do our best to try to address those questions, but we also see like there is a broad audience of new users that are coming to AppSheet, especially like with Google Workspace, for example. And we're also trying to make sure that they have the best information in order to get them past that first application experience.
You mentioned I can go to appsheet.com. Does it require Workspace? Do I have to have a Workspace account to actually use AppSheet?
Actually, no, you don't, because it was formerly an independent product. It still has its very simple onboarding on ramp, I guess, where you don't have to go through a paywall or whatever just to get experience. So that's where we have like a welcome mat. And then, like I said, you can work your way up to other pricing models, which are kind of based off of the different levels of features that you're offering. So like there's a AppSheet pricing guide that explains that there's a starter for a few bucks a month. And then there's like what's known as our most popular like AppSheet Core, which gets you kind of a pretty good level of features. And then from then on, it moves up into the enterprise SKUs. And this is where you typically are more of like a established enterprise and you look to use the more advanced enterprisey types of features. We're constantly kind of tweaking the formula a little bit so that we provide a simple on-ramp for people who just want to kind of kick the tires, so to speak, and then progressively move up and adding more features into the more enterprise-focused types of use cases as well.
So, Chris, I know that in some of the paid SKUs, there's also machine learning capabilities. Do you know of some interesting projects where customers have used this for AppSheet projects?
Sure. Yeah. One of the cool things that actually I even have personal experience with in building my video series that I built like over a year and a half ago was to essentially like a badge scanner. So a badge with text on it, and then being able to just kind of pull it up to your device or whatever, and then your application captures that, and it actually sends that up to essentially Vision API, essentially the ability to extract the text and then put it back into your application and then save that in a form. That's one simple use case that is rather trivial to put together. There's other use cases where you actually want to do prediction, and this is where you will actually go through the kind of the same steps that you would do in a traditional sense using Google Cloud Platform, where you have like a vast amount of data. That's your data model, you train it, and then you have essentially testing where you can kind of continue to tweak the results of that. So what AppSheet has done, and this has actually been a feature for a while, is that it's simplified that whole process of integrating machine learning and AI into your application such that you don't have to actually go to a Google Cloud project and turn on these APIs individually and then do in the traditional sense, but it kind of simplifies it down into a streamlined approach to where you could actually train your own custom data models and then be in a position to be able to do predictions based off of that data set that you've already done. I think in the video that I did, I had like a pricing indicator or a price estimator where you had incoming data and then you could then arrive at a predicted price point or something like that. But there's variations of this along the way. I've seen also a lot of other use cases where you typically start with like a vast amount of data, whether like, what would be like a potential real estate price for something based off of historical evidence, things like that. Although historically, it's hard to predict real estate because it can, be pretty crazy. The main goal of AppSheet in its approach to AI and machine learning is to simplify the process and and make it such that you don't have to kind of take off your citizen developer hat and put on a pro dev hat and then jump right directly into the Google Cloud Platform project configuration and manipulation and stuff like that. It's just keeps you in a fairly citizen developer friendly environment while doing a little bit more advanced machine learning and AI use cases.
I'm a big fan of AppScript. I think it's a pretty versatile tool. I'd love to understand better the relationship between AppSheet and AppScript. And so I know not that long ago, we released the ability to call AppScript from AppSheet. What have you seen as far as that relationship? Do you see AppSheet projects leading to AppScript? Do you see a nice culmination of the two working together? Do you see one replacing the other?
So yeah, just to kind of clarify, AppScript and AppSheet are not necessarily the same, but they can play in a similar space to some degree. For the most part, I find that the best value proposition that we see with the AppScript integration, meaning the ability to take an AppSheet application and have it be able to call an existing standalone AppScript function. The best value proposition is that people who have been working with AppScript for a long time, they may already have an existing large library of functions and processes and automations that they have already been working on over time. They now have the ability to add AppSheet as a simple kind of a front-end solution. And this front-end solution could be like a form that you would present to end users, so that provides an initial bit of data gathering, and then that could then provide a simple way to trigger it. Trigger, say, an existing AppScript based set of automations and such. Or you can even make it such that you would base it off of a specific event in an AppSheet automation. So you might want to key off of when a record is updated, when a record is inserted, things like that, where you can then, based on the application logic in your AppSheet application, you can actually decide if it makes sense to call a specific AppScript function. And so these types of integrations where you can make a little bit more, you have a little bit more to play with. So traditionally, before the AppScript integration, you could set up an automation, have it trigger, send an email, have it send a webhook call or SMS, things like that. It's just another tool in the arsenal where you can then say, okay, I want to take some data from a UI and send it down the pipeline to an AppScript function, and then it will go through and do that, whatever it needs to do. And furthermore, there's an additional thing where I can actually process the incoming response value from that script that I called, and then do something with that. And so it just kind of provides a bidirectional communication connection to essentially your AppSheet code, your AppSheet automations and such, to an existing set of AppScript code. I wouldn't necessarily, and just on that point, I wouldn't say that the AppScript automation or the AppScript integration is a feature designed purely for citizen developers who have never programmed with it. I think the more important point is that it opens up a whole new UI development automation technology that has not really been part of the AppScript developers toolset. So case in point, if you wanted to build a web interface with AppScript, you would typically have to drop down into using essentially AppScript's web app capability, where you would program at the HTML, CSS, JavaScript level. And you can do this, but it does incur a bit more coding on you as the app developer. Whereas if you want to just keep things simplified, or if you say you went to the point where you said, well, I just don't have enough cycles to build out a full web interface, that could have been a challenge. But now if you kind of couple AppSheet and its ability to provide a very straightforward mobile-friendly UI, and then that can serve as like a complementary solution to your AppScript code, where it might have been a blocker to have to go through and build out a whole AppScript-based web app with all the UI constructs, and do it in a mobile friendly fashion, because that's where you're starting to get into somewhat advanced web UI programming, where you have to understand CSS and HTML and essentially being able to make it so that it adapts to different screen sizes and such. That can be a bit more of a task than your average AppScript developer, I would say.
Chris, tell us a little bit about the innovations that we can look forward to when it comes to AppSheet.
We definitely have some features that are rolling out. So one of them is a technology known as AppSheet Database. AppSheet Database brings a new level of capability to AppSheet that it hasn't actually had before. Traditionally with AppSheet, you would always have AppSheet as your front-end UI builder, but that it would always connect to an external data source. That data source, for the most part, tended to be with Google Sheets, or it could be like Excel, like cloud-based Excel sheets and such. Within AppSheet itself, it never had kind of like a first-party, like a native database data modeling solution. So AppSheet Database actually provides that. It essentially provides database creation all within the AppSheet environment. So you can start from scratch. And if you tend to be more of a data first mindset, meaning like I want to build an application, but I'm mostly focusing about what data, what columns, what schema objects, I guess, that's where you don't have to step away from AppSheet and then go into some other design tool, whether it's just building a spreadsheet or going into a SQL database modeler and building out your schema. You can just stay within AppSheet, design your data as you need, and this could be a fully relational data model. And then at that point, you can just generate an app based off of your data that you've just designed in that feature. And so we just find that that provides a lot more flexibility, functionality, especially for folks who are more data first mindset. So they're more accustomed, I guess, to building out the data first, getting it ready to go, and then taking it at that point to then generate an app. And then they can customize the UI app constructs later. Another feature that we're very excited and that we're in the process of rolling out very soon is the ability to build chat apps. And so the idea or the main vision behind this is that we want to make chat app development a lot easier, but it's also in a focused manner. So typically AppSheet developers and their end users, they're focused on the data. So they're focused on insert, update, delete of data. And so our new implementation that's in the process of being rolled out basically simplifies chat access to being able to operate with that same data. So the way it works inside of AppSheet is that, say you have an existing app that does like query, basic CRUD capabilities, and it does it in a nice mobile-friendly form factor, or even desktop, doesn't really matter. But at the same time, you might want to open up a new interface into that same data. Traditionally, you would have to just step out of AppSheet entirely and build a chat app, either using AppScript alone or even just going to a traditional programming model. So with this new feature with AppSheet, you can actually just click on a chat option on the left nav bar, and then you just turn on chat. And then from then on, you can configure a few more things, and then you're up and running, and it will give you a made for free, essentially, chat interface into your data. So then that could be shared, and anyone could interface with that same core data that your AppSheet works with, but through a chat interface. Now, this is still early going, so we're still working out more, use cases along the way. But the first kind of edition of this feature will be to essentially provide full CRUD interactivity. So being able to list your data, edit the data, update the data. And there's techniques within the AppSheet app itself, such as creating what are called actions. So where you can actually have like little actionable buttons that appear in the chat interface itself that you can then, approve a request or things like that. So these are the kinds of use cases that are finding themselves to be rather trivial to make. And we've been discussing with this new feature with our enterprise customers, and they're immediately starting to say, oh yeah, this would be great. Because like normally I would have had to gone and do this amount of work to build a chat app that could serve as, say, an acronym finder or what have you. So that's one example. But there's lots of like things that tends to come up now, and people's creative juices get flowing, and they say, oh, cool, I have another way to provide yet another way to access the same data that they're working on.
Chris, what's your favorite feature in AppSheet?
Mobile app deployment. I could generate an app and boom, it's on my mobile phone.
What's your favorite solution you've ever built?
I like the badge scanner one that I built in a video. I thought it was cool to be able to rather easily build a a badge scanning technology using MLAI and vision and OCR text, and then have it just the amount of work that it took was laughably trivial. And at the end of the day, I had an app that could scan badges or really any document and grab that text and stick it into whatever data source.
What's the one place you would point people if they just fast forward to this entire interview? What's the one place you would send them to go learn more?
AppSheet.com. I mean, we still retain that domain. That gives you access to the project itself. You don't have to pay anything, and just try it. Play around with it. And then if you think the technology alone starts to meet your needs, then you can start to assess whether you want to step up into one of the initial paid models.
What's the one feature that's missing you'd like to see?
I'm still a fan of pixel perfect UI to some degree in a limited sense. I see a day in the future where you can have kind of best of both worlds, where you can say, okay, give me the default UI, boom, you're done. But I also like the potential for being able to open that up a little bit such that you can have AppSheet serving in a little bit more diverse from a UI standpoint environment, so that people can have a little more customizable UI in that sense, I would say.
So you have a background as a full stack developer. You've written a lot of code in your life. What made you move to the AppSheet team to focus on a no-code solution?
This goes back many years, and I don't even want to admit how many years it is. But personally, coming from a code-centric kind of environment, I've always felt that when you get into a lot of these fairly robust frameworks that have a lot of moving parts and lots of configuration, I've always felt that somewhere there's a better way to be doing these things. And so having, even before Google, I went through various iterations where I've worked with technology, and for every step we would take forward in what you could accomplish via the use cases, you would sometimes take a few steps back in level of difficulty. Sometimes things might have been made overcomplicated for a broader set of users. Some of my formative years have been watching people who are not always professional developers struggle, and finding that they have the right information, they're the right subject matter experts. They should be able to build their own solution. They're most comfortable with their data. They shouldn't have to pass that off to someone who's not familiar with their use case, someone who's not familiar with their data, to code something for them. They should be able to create their own solution. And I felt this even before I joined Google. And I've seen variations of this in the wild for well over, 15 years easily, where this approach, this idea that code or application development should not be such a hard task. And there should be ways to streamline this overall approach. So when I do see people who are not professionally, IT developers or what have you, getting that first level of success, that's what makes it all very much rewarding for me. Because it's like when I go back early in my career and I would see people struggle and really not getting a solution to solving that problem that they had, it kind of comes full circle. And it's like, okay, I think we're finally achieving levels of success that we had not seen before back in the day, I would say. So that's kind of what makes it rewarding for me, just to be able to share technology that makes a difference for not just the professional developer, but to a larger, broader class of citizen developers, or people who they want the ability to create usable applications to their specification, because they're typically the most in tune with what they need to do. They're most familiar with the data. They're most familiar with their end use cases, and just bridging that gap. I think that's what makes it most fulfilling for me, to see it in process and being able to kind of help out in that regard.
What's something about AppSheet that you would say, I'd like to change that because we didn't quite get it right?
As with any product, there's always stuff you can do better. And I have my short list, and then collectively the team has its list of things. And it's just a matter of like hashing out from a priority standpoint through what our end users are reporting, what UX research is reporting. For AppSheet to have continued success in the enterprise, it has to continue to work on, say, things like governance. It has to continue to work on things like being able to connect to a lot of different enterprise types of data sources and be interface with that. That's kind of the golden formula for like enterprise success. That being said, in order for AppSheet to reach a broader, wider audience who are comprised of not necessarily so technical people, the barriers of technical understanding need to continuously drop down, such that AppSheet can continue to become easier and more approachable to folks who may just need a simple solution for their own or their smaller businesses or their own departmental types of areas where they are still doing like largely manual processes. Like, for example, the ML AI example, where it's like taking complex technology that was typically only in the realm of professional developers, but then bringing it to citizen developers and say, hey, you can build your own custom models to be able to make predictions off of, or you can build simple OCR scanning technology and integrated that into an app without having to write code. I like that direction as well, and continuing to do our best to push AppSheet to continue to strive for both those sides. Some may suggest that that is not focus and that's not necessarily recipes for success. But I think when done in a tactical manner where you address key areas that are being requested by both audiences, you can arrive at a solution where you're both growing laterally. So you're being more useful to professional developers in a complementary way, but then also opening up doors to less technical citizen developers such that they can accomplish their tasks with a lot less need for having to either jump into other technologies or stick with AppSheet, but only having partial solutions, or through kind of a lot of customization.
Chris, thank you so much for joining us. We really super appreciate you being here. Everything was perfect until I said open my mouth.
Who's going to say the next thing?
I don't know. I'm waiting.